Today we're going to talk about the final 2 years before the Second World War breaks out in Europe. And I want you to try to keep in the back of your mind when we're talking about these events happening in 1938 and into 1939, war is already happening in Asia, right? Japan invades mainland China in 1937. So this kind of makes it difficult sometimes. Usually if you're asked when does World War II start, I think most people in our neck of the woods think of maybe 1941, because that's when we joined into the war after Pearl Harbor in December of 41. Or maybe they go to the 1939 date that we're going to talk about today. But if we're calling it World War II, and we're including both the Asian theater, or the Pacific theater, and Europe, you've got to go back to 1937 for the beginning of this war, at least in Asia. Today, though, we're focused on Europe and Germany's expansion in 1938 and 39. Yeah. This is 2.6. No, 2.5. My bad. 2.5. Sorry. All right. Start off with Anschluss. Anschluss. We've talked about this already. We're going over it again. Anschluss is that political union. L-U-S-S, or you can do one of these. Anschluss is that political union between Austria and Germany. It has long been desired between Austria and Germany by many in both Germany and Austria. After World War I, when Austria-Hungary is broken up, what is Austria doesn't have a lot going for it. The richest industrial sections of the old Austro-Hungarian Empire now are a part of Czechoslovakia. So Austria is kind of like a mountainous, resource-weak tourist destination. But it's chock full of Germans. And so Adolf Hitler, wanting to create a greater Germany, and Germany for German speakers, needs to bring in Austria. But the Treaty of Versailles says no Anschluss, and the Treaty of Saint-Germain with Austria says no Anschluss. Well, Germany's going to be pushing towards this. Remember, Hitler had designs to do this much earlier, back in 1934. If you recall, there was the Austrian Chancellor. Anybody recall his name? Dollfuss, very good. Engelbert Dollfuss, who was assassinated, murdered by Austrian Nazis. But at that point, Mussolini is strong, Hitler is relatively weak. And Hitler can't stand up to a Mussolini threat when Mussolini moves 100,000 troops to his northern border and says, Adolf, you're not going to be taking this nation over, because he doesn't want to see a larger Germany on his north. Fast forward to 1938, and we have a very different story. Mussolini has been involved in now 2 wars. First in Abyssinia in Africa, second in the Spanish Civil War. Now, Hitler was involved in that one too, but only with his Air Force and only with some submarines, where Mussolini was sending tens of thousands of Italian troops into it. So by 1938, the relationship between Germany and Italy is very different. All right? Italy has burned bridges with Britain and France. They have sidled up closer to Germany. That Spanish Civil War brought them even closer together. And by 1938, Benito Mussolini makes it clear to Adolf Hitler that he won't oppose any kind of uniting between those 2 nations. Now, rewind a little bit to 1936. In 1936, Germany and Austria will sign what's called the Austro-German Agreement. Remember, Adolf Hitler likes these bilateral agreements, these two-nation agreements, where Germany will reaffirm its support for Austrian independence, and that neither nation would interfere in the other's internal affairs. But for this, Austrian Nazis would be given some prominent positions within the Austrian government. All right? It's a little bit of a quid pro quo. You do something and you get something in return. Yes? The Austro-German Agreement. So Hitler says to Austria, hey, Austria, you get to be independent. No problems here. Just get a couple Nazis in your government. What could possibly go wrong? Now in 1938, continued political violence in Austria. And guys, did you all notice, and this is not me attempting to equate what's going on today in our own election to the machinations before World War II. But did you notice that there was a bombing at a Republican headquarters in North Carolina over the weekend. Republican headquarters in North Carolina was firebombed, and then there was some like anti-Republican, equating Republicans to neo-Nazis, graffiti that was scrawled on another building. This was in North Carolina. That's political violence. Now, Donald Trump claims to know who perpetrated this, but there's an investigation. There's no one that's been arrested for it. Was it Hillary supporters? Was it Trump supporters trying to make it look like it was Hillary? Who knows? No one knows ultimately who it was. But that's what political violence is, right? Like there's an election or there's something happening politically, and some people are using violent means to try in one way or another influence the election in their own favor. That's political violence. We're having it like right now, literally. Or when people go to rallies and they get kind of pushed around or roughed around, or when other people go to rallies to try to stop, or if you might remember maybe from earlier in the primary season when protesters of Donald Trump were like blocking off highways, right? Well, while it might not be like violence per se, like that is disrupting society for political moves. So this stuff happens. It was happening in Austria back in 1938 to a much greater degree. Austrian Nazis Austrian Nazis perpetrating this political violence and hoping to stoke chaos in Austria would lead the Austrian Chancellor, a guy named Kurt Schuschnigg. I'm going to write that on the board for you, because that is like as German a name as you can get. S-C-H-U. That's not even enough SCHs in his name. S-C-H-U-S-C-H-N-I-G-G. In German, this double G kind of gives one of these sounds. So, Schuschnigg. Whatever. Yes, ma'am. He is the Austrian Chancellor in 1938. So things are going crazy in Austria. A lot of the violence is perpetrated by Austrian Nazis. Who better to try to work with to quell this violence than the leader of the Nazi party in Germany, Adolf Hitler? So Schuschnigg, the Austrian Chancellor, calls for a meeting with Adolf Hitler. Hey, what can you do to calm this stuff down? This was a bad idea. Schuschnigg goes to Germany and enters into this meeting with Adolf Hitler, and then is met by an over 2-hour barrage of attacks from Adolf Hitler himself. Following this, instead of Hitler helping Schuschnigg out with his problems, he actually levies some demands on him to release pro-Nazi agitators from Austrian jails. Let guys that you've arrested for causing political violence, let them out of your jails. To lift a ban on the Nazi Party in Austria that's been in place since 1934, after the murder of the Dollfuss, Ingvar Dollfuss. To appoint more Nazis into the Austrian government. And to start to assimilate the Austrian and the German economies. Now, you don't have to have each of these steps memorized, but what is Hitler doing? He's drawing these two countries closer to each other. Whereas Schuschnigg had problems with Austrian Nazis causing violence, now he's essentially opening the door for more Austrian Nazis in his country. Failure to meet these demands would result in an invasion of Austria. Hitler lays it out. You give me what I want, or we invade. Schuschnigg goes back to Austria. And rather than conceding to Hitler's demands, he calls for a plebiscite. We've used this word a lot, right? A plebiscite, a vote of the people. He calls for a plebiscite. Hey, Austrian people, what do you want? Do you want us to give in to German demands, or do you want us to be an independent nation? Adolf Hitler will circumvent the plebiscite. He will jump the gun on the plebiscite. He doesn't want the vote to take place. Because if the vote takes place and Austrians say, we want independence, and then Hitler then invades, he looks like the bad guy. And throughout the whole course of events we've been talking about the last couple of days, remember, Hitler's always trying to position himself to look like the guy that's on the side of keeping the peace. Hitler does not want this vote to go down. So rather than letting the vote happen and knowing he won't have opposition from Italy and Benito Mussolini to the south, and believing that he won't have opposition from Britain and France, and we'll talk about that in a moment, Adolf Hitler on the 12th of March, 1938, will send his army into Austria. He will invade Austria. This is particularly light today, isn't it? Your bulb is dying. Adolf Hitler on the 12th of March, 1938, will execute the Anschluss. He will invade Austria. Then, with Nazi troops in the nation, the plebiscite will be held. We'll have a vote of the people now. Do you want to be a part of Germany, or do you want to be an independent state going forward? And 99% of Austrians say Anschluss. 99% say let's join with Germany. More often than not, if you hear any vote going, like if I were to tell you guys right now, hey, all you got to do is vote yes or no. Donuts for everybody. 4 people in this class would probably, and that's like 15%, would probably be like, nah, we don't eat donuts. They're so bad for you. Really, you're starting to. It's hard to get 100% of the people to agree to something. So what can you assume if you have a vote where 99% of the people are voting to join with Germany? That it's either rigged, and we're hearing a lot about that right now in this election too. It's either rigged or they're just feeling intimidated. They don't feel safe with German soldiers left and right to vote maybe their true desires. So here we have now a situation where Germany now has the Anschluss. The Treaty of Versailles said, no, you can't do this. It has now been done. Austria will be annexed. And Britain and France do nothing. But we want to take a moment to think about some reasons why Britain and France would do nothing. Give me a reason why Britain and France would do nothing. Yes, ma'am?
Aren't they still pretty weak from the Depression?
Okay, they've got economic concerns of the Depression that they're dealing with. Yes, ma'am?
They want to avoid war at all.
War is the worst thing that anybody could possibly imagine. They want to avoid it at all costs. But before we were talking about war in Manchuria or war in Asia, and kind of the racial component held people back from that. And then we were talking about war in Africa, and maybe the racial component would hold people back. But now these are like Austrians. These are like white Europeans, right? Why not go to war for them? And here we have an explanation that you need to be able to apply for this Austrian story. The Austrian army didn't defend itself. Austrian people weren't rising up against Germans. So how are you going to convince, if you're a democratic Britain or a democratic France, convince your boys and your constituents to send their boys off to fight a war that not even Austria is willing to fight right here? And then the plebiscite happens, and 99% of Austrians, whether it's a legit election or not, say, we're good with this. You're going to go fight and die and have the expenses of a modern war? Remember, World War I was now 25 years ago, right? That war is ancient in terms of the technological developments we've had since then. They ain't going to war over this. Okay, good? Yes, ma'am?
So did Britain and France not think that the election was like rigged or anything? Like not intimidated?
I'm sure they thought the election was not quite legit. Yeah, but what are they going to do about it, right? What is the easier path there? Just accepting this? And again, Austria didn't militarily resist. They kind of let it happen. Yes, ma'am? There was still that side in Britain and to some extent in France, but they're more concerned about Germany. That, hey, a strong Germany is not a bad thing because it can stop the spread of communism. But they're starting to get more and more concerned about Germany as every bit of the story unfolds. Okay, next. Yes, ma'am?
We've been talking a lot about the League of Nations.
Yeah.
And about their inability to
Yeah.
do anything. What did they do at all? Like,
Nothing.
So they had no power.
No. Yeah. Nothing.
Why didn't it fall apart sooner?
I don't know. The question was, why didn't it fall apart sooner? It really already has fallen. I don't know. People like to sit in meetings and have breakfast and lunch provided for them. I don't know. Geneva's a nice town, I'm sure. But it's really ineffectual at this point. All right. The next step, we're going to look at this border region of Czechoslovakia and Germany. It is called the Sudetenland. Sudetenland, I should have had that up there. Actually, it is right there. You can kind of see it, but I'll write it too. Sudetenland. The Sudetenland. Following Anschluss, Adolf Hitler, and guys, this goes really well, because look what Adolf Hitler has done. He has remilitarized. The British and French didn't bat an eyelash. He moved an army into the Rhineland. Britain and France didn't bat an eyelash. He's now taken Austria. No German soldiers had to fire their weapons in this invasion. Things are going very well for Adolf Hitler right here. He's growing not only in his nation's stature, but he's himself is growing confidence. And now he turns his attention to what is known as the Sudetenland. Czechoslovakia becomes the primary target to Adolf Hitler next. First, the majority of Czechoslovakia, they're Slavs. They're Slavic people. And this fits into what Adolf Hitler would call the Untermensch, or the Untermenschen. Another one of those SCHs. Unter means under, Uber means over, right? So Untermensch is like subhumans, all right? They're not with the Ubermenschen of the Germans, the Superman of the Germans. So it's filled with Slavic people, which Adolf Hitler doesn't like. Many Czechs resisted the Austrian. Remember, this used to be a part of Austria-Hungary, right? So many Czechs and Slovaks during the Austro-Hungarian Empire, they didn't like the German government in Vienna. All right? They resisted that rule back in the Empire days. And when Austria-Hungary is broken up and Czechoslovakia is created, there are many Germans that live in this border area, not surprisingly, between Germany and Czechoslovakia. So you've got Germans who are now, like those Germans that live in Czechoslovakia, used to be Germans in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and were like, high five, we run this government. Cool. But now they're minority Germans in a Czechoslovakian state. And they don't feel that they are treated on an equal level to the larger populations of Czechs or the larger populations of Slovaks in Czech. That's where the word comes. You know, there's two countries today, right? There's the Czech Republic and there's Slovakia. Czechoslovakia was like kind of a combination of those two large ethnic groups. Czechoslovakia was also a big-time supporter of the League of Nations and an ally to France. France, since the beginning of Czechoslovakia after World War I, was a supporter of the Czech military and helping them arm. France wanted a strong Czechoslovakia to Germany's east. Geographically speaking, like if we look at the map, it looks like Czechoslovakia is like jabbing Germany right in its midsection, right? This would be a very powerful ally. And in fact, though it would surprise us today to think about it, Czechoslovakia was a pretty powerful country in Europe in 1938. They had a very strong military. They were a democratic state. They were economically rich. This was an up-and-coming nation. Their military, Czechoslovakian military in 1938, far outclassed even the military of the United States in 1938. All right? So this was a real deal threat to Germany. Well, Adolf Hitler turns his attention to Czechoslovakia, and first, the Sudetenland region. Now, the Sudetenland region of Czechoslovakia is the border region between Germany and Czechoslovakia. It's mountainous. It was, in fact, given to this nation of Czechoslovakia, like as Czechoslovakia was created after World War I, they were sure to put this Sudetenland region in Czechoslovakia because it was mountainous, and those mountains form like a natural defensive border with Germany. And along that defensive border, for years, the Czechs had been developing a border system. Sorry, it's so light here, but I just can't turn the lights up, or no one would see anything. They built a border system that is sometimes referred to as the Little Maginot Line. I'm going to talk about the Maginot Line in a week or two, but the Maginot Line was a line of French defenses between Germany and the border of France. And they were French defenses at their border with Germany. Well, because French money and French arms supported Czechoslovakia, they also got some help from some French engineers in developing their line of defenses. So sometimes this line of defenses between Czechoslovakia and Germany is referred to as Le Petit Maginot, the Little Maginot Line, right? So this is right into the Sudetenland. But also in the Sudetenland is about 3.5 million Sudeten Germans. All right? German-speaking people living in Czechoslovakia. And they resented the Czech government. They used to be living high on the hog in Austria-Hungary because Germans were governing. But now they're a minority in a Czechoslovakian state. And the Great Depression only exacerbated their grievances, only escalated their beef with the government. Because the economy was poor, unemployment was high, and the minority Germans felt persecuted. The Sudeten leader, the Sudeten German leader, he was the leader of what was called the Sudeten German Party, was a man named Konrad Heinlein. Here he is meeting with Adolf Hitler. In April of 1938, Konrad Heinlein will demand from the Czech government political autonomy for Sudeten Germans. To be politically autonomous means we get to run our own show now. All right? We get to govern ourselves within this entity. He demanded political autonomy for the Sudetenland region. He ain't going to get it. He's not going to get it. Yes. 1938. We're in May of 1938. On May 20th, 1938, rumors that ultimately proved to be unfounded, that Germany was like getting its military ready to move into Czechoslovakia. Rumors broke out that Germany was getting ready to move. And France said, hey, Germany, you chillax. We got Czechoslovakia's back. And Hitler had to embarrassingly say, we weren't doing anything here. And nothing was happening. There were no mobilizations. But boy, does Adolf Hitler not want to admit this, because this looks like weakness in the face of Britain and France. France is strong, tells Hitler, you better not. And Hitler's like, we're not. But Hitler's furious, and he wants Czechoslovakia more than ever. With this, Hitler will encourage Konrad Heinlein and the Sudeten Germans to escalate their agitation in the Sudetenland. On the 5th of September, the Czech president will agree to offer the Sudeten Germans some political autonomy. He's going to give them what they want in September of 1938. He's going to give them what they want. But Hitler tells Heinlein to reject that. Because what does Hitler want? He wants Czechoslovakia. He certainly wants the Sudetenland. And if the Sudeten Germans are like, oh, cool, we got what we wanted, so we can all chill out, then war might not come, or there might not be an excuse for the war to take Czechoslovakia. So continued violence and continued agitation in the Sudetenland region will lead the Czech government to declare martial law. And we've already talked about that, right? Martial law is what?
It's a war that is, it's a kind of warlike.
Yeah, martial law is when the military kind of takes over the policing. Like, we're going to send the army in to kind of quell disturbances, to quell riots. Martial law is declared in Czechoslovakia. And things are looking very ugly. In steps the British Prime Minister. His name is Neville Chamberlain. He's this guy right here. I kind of feel bad for Neville Chamberlain. There's probably not a guy outside of Adolf Hitler that gets more blame for the occurrence of the Second World War than British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain. Neville Chamberlain wants to do what pretty much every other European wants to do. Avoid war. Nobody wants war. hoping to avoid a war over Czechoslovakia, Neville Chamberlain will reach out to Hitler and call for a meeting. Let's talk this out. Yes?
Is that date at the top of the slide wrong? Because wasn't that...
It should be 38. Yes, my bad. That should be September 1938. Good catch. Yes?
Did Germany also not want war?
No. Well, they want war eventually. They're not quite ready for it. Hitler's generals are letting him know, we're not ready for a big war yet. You better relax. But ultimately they do. Did I have another hand? All right. So Chamberlain wants to solve the problem. Because how do we solve diplomatic disputes? Through talking it out, right? That's what the Kellogg-Briand Pact said. That's what we've always been working towards since the end of World War I. So let's meet about this. They will meet 3 times. I need you not to write about all 3 of these meetings. I just want you to know they meet 3 times. You just listen for a little bit, and then I'll tell you what ultimately to write down. First meeting in Germany on the 15th of September. Do not write that down. You don't have to memorize that. Adolf Hitler and Neville Chamberlain will work out an agreement where those areas of the Sudetenland that are majority German, like 50% or more German, they will be transferred to Germany. And the French and the Czechs will even agree to this. Chamberlain gets them to go along. Hey guys, we all want to avoid war. Let's let him have his places that are majority German, and then we can be cool. But then a week later, Hitler recognizes that he is frustrated. He wants war. He wants all of Czechoslovakia. And he already worked out a deal where he's only going to get part of the Sudetenland. That's not going to be good enough. So now he is demanding that other ethnic minorities in Czechoslovakia should gain their own independence as well. This is Adolf Hitler, Aryan Adolf Hitler, saying that, hey, the Poles in Czechoslovakia, they should be autonomous too. And all these other people that live as ethnic minorities in Czechoslovakia, they should have their own rights too. What a guy, right? He doesn't care about them. He doesn't care about them. He just wants the pretext for more conflict. Czechoslovakia will reject this agreement, or this new turn in the negotiations. And France lets it be known that they will support their ally in Czechoslovakia. So now we're at an impasse. First meeting looked good, but then Hitler went back on it. Second meeting, Hitler reaches for the stars, and no one wants to give it to him. So who can solve this problem? No other than Benito Mussolini. Let's have one more meeting. And Benito Mussolini is going to put it together. And it's going to be held in Munich, Germany in September of 1938. Do not believe what that slide tells you. September of 1938. A final meeting called the Munich Conference. Germany is there. Britain is there. France is there. Italy is there. Who do you think should be there? Not there. Czechoslovakia is not invited. Neither is the Soviet Union invited. Ooh, that's going to make Stalin a little irritated. All right? Out of the Munich Conference comes the Munich Pact, or the Munich Agreement. And what this agreement says is that Adolf Hitler will occupy all of the Sudetenland. He's going to get it all. And then an international commission will oversee other disputed areas. And there will be plebiscites. The people will get to vote. So those Poles in Czechoslovakia, they can vote. Do they want to be a part of Poland? They want to be a part of Czechoslovakia. Czechs would be allowed to leave. Those Czechs that live in the Sudetenland, where are we at? Those Czechs that live in the Sudetenland, they can freely go to Czechoslovakia. And Germans that live in Czechoslovakia, they can freely go to the Sudetenland. Everybody's going to get to free exchange. And the 4 powers, Britain and France and Germany and Italy, they guarantee Czech sovereignty. They just took away Czech sovereignty, but now they're guaranteeing Czech sovereignty. They guarantee the independence of Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia is left with no option here, because they don't have any support from Britain. They don't have any support from their long ally in France. They're left with no option but to accept this Munich agreement. Yes?
Why would they, why did the Munich agreement happen anyway? Why did they just give Germany Sudetenland?
Nobody wants war. Nobody wants war. They're willing to go that far. Nobody wants war.
Okay.
During this meeting, Neville Chamberlain and Adolf Hitler will sign another agreement. We'll talk about this more in a couple days, but it's called the Anglo-German Declaration. British and German declaration. They sign an agreement that says that any disputes between them will be talked out, not war. Neville Chamberlain is so excited. And he goes back to London and he gets off his plane and he waves the Anglo-German Declaration in the air. And he's got a crowd of cheering fans there supporting him, and he tells the British people that we will have peace in our time. Yeah, everyone goes nuts. And now this is like he's the poster child for giving in to aggressive demands. And today, any time that Barack Obama has any kind of agreement or negotiation with a country that might be a threat to the United States, like when the Iran negotiations went through, according to Donald Trump, the worst deal ever made in the history of deals. He's referred to as Barack Obama, or anybody that does such an agreement might be called a Neville Chamberlain. We'll talk more about Neville Chamberlain in a couple days, but man, this guy did not have a good historical view. Okay, he does not look good as we look back. But remember, he doesn't know what's going to happen next. All right, that is the Munich Pact. That is the Munich Agreement. As early as the 21st of October, just 3 weeks after Hitler is given the Sudetenland, he will let his military advisors know to plan for the liquidation of the remainder of the Czech state. So he wants it all. And he will get it all. He will get it all. What's left for Czechoslovakia is not much. They lost 70% of their heavy industry. A lot of their industrial areas were in that western part of Czechoslovakia in the Sudetenland. They lost a third of their population. They lost their natural defenses and those Sudetenland fortifications. They can't defend themselves at all anymore. Hitler, yes ma'am.
But why didn't the Czechoslovakians, militarize, I guess? Like, why didn't they stand up?
Because what would happen? They would lose. They knew they would lose. That's why Colin doesn't ever want to fight me, because I destroy him. All right? They knew they would lose. They didn't have Britain on their side. They didn't have France. France and Britain agreed to this.
Didn't they have a strong military?
Yeah, but now they just lost all their border defenses. Germany just got them in the Sudan. Like, the border defenses that we were looking at, this like little Maginot Line,
Yeah.
that's in the Sudetenland. You can't pick this up and move it. This is like dug in concrete fortifications in the earth. They're gone now. So Czechoslovakia has no border defenses anymore, and they will have no allies helping them out anymore. What can they do? So you fight and you get destroyed, or you just throw in the towel. They largely threw in the towel. On March 15th of 1939, German troops will move in and occupy the remainder of Czechoslovakia. Hitler violated the Munich Pact. British policy towards Germany will now change. Neville Chamberlain says, and this guy, we can't trust him. We can't follow any agreements with Nazi leadership. We can't rely on them. And now we turn our attention to Poland. Poland, remember, was created after World War I. And part of Poland was carved out of the old German state from before World War I, including what is called the Polish Corridor. You need to know of that existence, which bisected the German state. And then the city of Danzig, or in Poland, Gdansk, would be what's called a free city, an international free city. The League of Nations would oversee that. And both Poland and Germany could use that important port city. That's the situation of Poland. Well, after Germany takes Czechoslovakia with no one batting an eyelash, Hitler calls for the city of Danzig to go to Germany. He said it should be returned to Germany like it once was. And that Germany should be able to have German rail lines controlled by Germans that can go across this Polish corridor. Poland refuses. Poland is not willing to make these concessions. In March of 1939, Adolf Hitler deals with the nation of Lithuania. This is directly to the northeast of Poland. Deals with the nation of Lithuania. For the region of Memel, pardon me, Lithuania's up here. This is East Prussia. Lithuania's up here to the northeast. For the city and region around Memel, M-E-M-E-L, where there's a bunch of German speakers in it. And Hitler says to the Lithuanians, hey, why don't you guys give us that? And the Lithuanians ultimately agree, wanting to avoid any greater conflict. So the city of Memel will go over to Lithuania, or go over to Germany, pardon me. Because the Lithuanians can't resist the powerful German military. Britain and France, seeing that the Polish invasion by Germany is probably inevitable, give an assurance to the Polish. On March 30th of 1939, Britain and France offer a guarantee to Polish security. 2 days later, Germany will end that Germany-Poland non-aggression pact. Remember that 10-year pact signed in 1934? It only lasts 5 years. And Germany begins to plan what is called Operation White, the German invasion of Poland. And now the ball starts moving pretty quickly. On May 22nd, 1939, we've already talked about this. On May 22nd, 1939, following the German takeover of Czechoslovakia and the Italian takeover of Albania, Italy and Germany signed the Pact of Steel, which aligns their economies and militaries, essentially. They are now military allies. And then we have to deal with the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union is over here. It borders Poland on its east. Germany's got to be very concerned about the Soviet Union. If the Soviet Union feels threatened by Germany, an invasion of Poland might never happen, because Germany is not really ready for a war against the Soviets yet. So Adolf Hitler begins working, and his foreign advisors begin working on the Soviet Union. Now, Britain and France are working on the Soviets too. They would love to have the Soviet Union as an ally, even if they're communist. But ultimately, no agreement is ever worked out between the British and the French and the Soviets, because Stalin just doesn't trust them. Remember, Munich Pact, the Soviet Union wasn't invited. The League of Nations, the Soviet Union was kept out of that for more than a decade after its creation. They don't trust the Western powers, the capitalist powers of the West. So Germany gets to the Soviet Union first. In August of 1939, Germany and the Soviet Union will sign the Nazi-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact. The Nazi-Soviet Non-Aggression. Hey, another bilateral agreement from Germany, right? The Nazi-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact. Where each nation agrees to be neutral in the event of a war. I won't get involved in your war, you don't get involved in my war. We'll stay out of it. This is not a military alliance, this is a non-aggression pact. It's kind of like a neutrality pact. If war comes, stay out of it. And they also agree to divide Europe amongst them. That the Soviet Union will be able to take eastern Poland and the Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, and Finland. That can be Soviet too. While Germany will focus on the western part of Poland and Denmark and Norway and Sweden and further west in France and Britain. They divide Europe between them. The benefits to Hitler in this, it avoids a two-front war. He doesn't have to worry about the Soviet Union anymore. It allows him to take Poland without fear. And he can get resources out of the Soviet Union. Economic relationships will continue. For the Soviets, the benefits, it keeps them out of a bigger war in Europe. Because they've got issues on their east. They have a Japanese problem in their east. The long game, here's what Stalin's hoping for in the long run. If Germany and Britain and France get into a war with each other, what will they each do to each other? They'll destroy each other. They'll weaken each other, which will pave the way for the Soviets moving in the future. On the 25th of August of 1939. What's that? Yes, the next day. Britain and Germany will sign a full... Pardon me, that doesn't make any sense. Britain and Poland will sign a full military alliance. Britain has got Poland's back. Benito Mussolini, he's not ready for war. He's not ready for war. He says, hey, let's have another meeting about this crisis. But time for meetings are done. There will not be another meeting. Hitler will not wait for war. On the 31st of August, a radio station on the border between Germany and Poland, is attacked by Polish soldiers. Well, not really. It's attacked by German SS soldiers wearing Polish uniforms. And bodies are left behind. Bodies with Polish uniforms. But bodies of German criminals that were lethally injected and then shot to make it look like the Poles had attacked Germany. This gives Germany a casus belli. You notice, remember how the Mukden incident was made it look like Manchuria, but it was actually Japan. This is setting up a cause for war that is totally illegitimate. All right? Germany uses this attack by Poland, in quotes there, to be its pretext for war, its casus belli. And on the 1st of September of 1939, German armies will invade Poland.